Deccan Horse enters the Asal Uttar story at the moment when preparation had to become battle. By the 8th of September 1965, Indian forces had pulled back from Kemkaran. Engineers had begun shaping the ground with mines and water, and infantry positions were forming around the defensive box. But a plan on the ground is only a plan until the first enemy tanks arrive. Deccan Horse, an old Indian armored regiment equipped largely with Sherman tanks, was among the first armored units to meet the Pakistani thrust at close and dangerous range. Its importance lies not in having the newest machines, but in showing how discipline, concealment, and timing could make older tanks matter against a stronger-looking armored force. If you would like to move beyond the podcast, you can see my available books at militaryauthor.me. And at trackpads.com, you will find magazines and galleries with hundreds of thousands of photos and videos to explore. The Shermans of Deccan Horse carried the memory of an earlier armored age. They were Second World War designs, respected in their time but no longer modern by 1965 when set beside Pakistan's Pattons. On paper, the comparison looked worrying for the Indian crews. The Pattons had a reputation for stronger armor, better firepower, and a more modern battlefield presence. Yet battles are not fought on paper, and tank crews do not fire at specification charts. They fire across fields, through smoke, from partial cover, and under the pressure of fear and command. Around Asal Uttar, the Sherman's age mattered, but so did the way the regiment used ground, patience, and the enemy's loss of freedom.
Lieutenant Colonel A.S. Vadya, commanding Deccan Horse, faced the kind of problem armored leaders have faced since tanks first appeared: how to fight a stronger enemy without offering him the battle he wants. His regiment could not pretend that its Shermans were Pattons. It could not win by charging into an open contest of speed and weight. The sensible answer was to fight from positions that reduced the enemy's advantages. Tanks could be hidden in and around sugarcane, sighted near likely approaches, and used where Pakistani armor was slowed by mines, wet ground, or uncertainty. The regiment's battlefield role was therefore defensive but active. It had to help break momentum before momentum became breakthrough.
The first contacts were psychologically important. Pakistani armor was advancing with the expectation that Indian positions might be unsettled after the withdrawal from Kemkaran. If the first Indian tank resistance had been weak, scattered, or panicked, the attacking formation might have gained confidence and speed. Instead, Deccan Horse's fire showed that the route ahead was defended by crews who could wait, aim, and hit. In armored warfare, the first knocked-out tanks can have an effect far beyond their number. They tell advancing crews that the enemy is not fleeing. They tell commanders that routes are not safe. They tell supporting infantry and engineers that the fight will not be a simple pursuit. The mood of the offensive begins to change. The range of the fighting mattered because close country compresses armored battle into brutal decisions. A tank advancing through restricted ground may not see the enemy until the moment of danger. Sugarcane, smoke, dust, village edges, and uneven fields all reduced the clean visibility that tank commanders prefer. A Sherman waiting in concealment could be far more dangerous than the same Sherman moving in the open. The crew could keep still, reduce its signature, and fire when the attacker was committed. A Patton surprised while negotiating soft ground or a narrow approach could not use all of its theoretical strengths at once. The battle became less about abstract superiority and more about who saw first, fired first, and stayed calm. Deccan Horse also depended on the work of other arms. Its tanks did not sit alone in heroic isolation, and to tell the story that way would distort the battle. Infantry positions helped define the defensive box and protected the ground around the tanks. Engineers had made movement dangerous through mines, flooding, and obstacles. Artillery could strike concentrations and make Pakistani crews close down, reducing their ability to observe. Communications linked reports from forward positions to tank commanders who needed to know where the next threat was developing. A Sherman in a prepared defensive system was a different weapon from a Sherman caught alone in open country. The system gave old steel new relevance. Still, the dangers facing Deccan Horse were severe. An older tank could not absorb punishment casually, and its crew knew that a hit from a heavier enemy gun could be fatal. The men inside had limited space, poor comfort, and little room for romantic thoughts about battle. They worked in heat, noise, fumes, and uncertainty, with visibility often limited and the next movement of the enemy unclear. A tank crew must act as a small team, with the commander observing and directing, the gunner finding and engaging targets, the loader keeping the gun fed, the driver reading the ground, and the wireless operator or hull crewman helping maintain the rhythm of action. Fear had to be converted into procedure. The regiment's early resistance helped slow the Pakistani attack at precisely the point where speed mattered most. Pakistan's plan required movement through Khem-Karan and beyond, not a prolonged fight inside a defended zone. Every delay gave Indian positions more time to settle. Every disabled or burning vehicle made the next crew more cautious. Every report of hidden Indian tanks complicated the attackers' understanding of the battlefield. This is how a few early hits can change the psychology of an armored advance. The damage is material, but it is also mental. An attack that expected to exploit withdrawal begins to wonder whether it has entered a trap, and that hesitation becomes part of the defender's firepower. The battle also revealed the limits of a tank force that is not fully supported at the decisive moment. Pakistani armor needed infantry close enough to clear Indian positions, engineers ready to deal with mines and wet ground, artillery able to suppress concealed tanks, and reconnaissance capable of identifying the true defensive layout. When those elements were delayed, separated, or uncertain, the tanks carried too much of the burden alone. Deccan Horse exploited that vulnerability. Its Shermans did not have to defeat the entire Pakistani armored division by themselves. They had to make the leading elements pay for advancing into ground where the Indian defense could see more clearly than the attackers understood. That was enough to begin unraveling momentum. There is a tendency in later memory to turn armored regiments into symbols, and Deccan Horse certainly became part of the proud memory of Asal Uttar. But the educational value of the regiment's action is greater than commemoration alone. It teaches that inferior or older equipment can still be tactically effective when used according to its strengths and limitations. It teaches that fire discipline matters as much as courage. It teaches that the first phase of a defensive battle is not simply survival, but diagnosis. By engaging the Pakistani attack and slowing it, Deccan Horse helped reveal the shape of the enemy thrust. The defense could then respond not to rumor, but to contact. The fighting of Deccan Horse also connects Asal Uttar to the wider development of armored warfare. Since the First World War, tank doctrine had often promised that mass and speed could tear open a front before the defender recovered. By 1965, modern radios, better guns, and heavier tanks made that promise more persuasive. Yet Deccan Horse showed that the defender's answer had also matured. Concealment, obstacles, anti-tank fire, artillery, and controlled armored ambush could make even a modern thrust slow down and bleed. The tank had not become obsolete. It had become more dependent than ever on the battlefield system around it. When that system failed, older machines in better positions could still impose a high price. Deccan Horse matters because it gave Asal Uttar its first hard proof that the Indian defensive plan could work. The regiment did not win the battle alone, and it would be wrong to suggest that it did. More fighting lay ahead, and stronger Indian armored reserves would become crucial as the battle developed. But the first engagements helped change the character of the Pakistani advance from confident movement into contested movement. That change was decisive. The older Shermans of Deccan Horse, handled with patience and supported by terrain and combined arms, helped stop the offensive from becoming a clean breakout. At Asal Uttar, the first answer to armored ambition came not from perfect equipment, but from crews who used imperfect equipment well.
You've been listening to Famous Tank Battles. These battles were never just about machines. They were about doctrine, terrain, firepower, logistics, and the hard problem of turning shock into victory. For more military history writing and books, visit militaryauthor.me. And for magazines, podcasts, and a massive archive of military photos and video, visit trackpads.com. Thanks for listening.